Okay, everybody. We're running just a few tiny minutes behind because we started a little later to let folks get to fully enjoy our Native American dance experience. Right now, we're going to begin our panel discussion on the role of dance in our culture. At the table, I'll introduce our several panelists. At the far end of the table with the red hair over there is Miss Gracie Babineau. Gracie is a singer-songwriter with the Babineau Sisters, and she's been a part of the music industry for the past 12 years. She's also an award-winning published author and songwriter through the Library of Congress. She is also an artisan here in our village at Vermilionville, and we're very proud to have her with us. And she's also a big advocate of the French language. So we have Gracie with us. Next to Gracie is Mr. Joe Citizen. He was just invited moments ago to be on our panel. We didn't realize we'd have the pleasure of having him here, and he has very graciously agreed to join the panel. Mr. Joe knows more, I think, about the tradition of la-la dancing than anyone I've ever met, and is a huge fan of dancing and Cajun and Zydeco music, and so we're thrilled to have him with us. Next to Mr. Joe is Miss Sherry Broussard. Ms. Broussard is a former classroom teacher and a librarian, and she's currently a storyteller and a book author. She's completed several books, and she has, I know, her Zydeco books for sale just outside. Ms. Broussard has also served as one of our board members, and we are delighted to have her here. She's a member of a Storytellers Guild and has been very generous in helping to preserve and promote our culture. And next to Ms. Broussard, we have Dr. Natalie Kiefer. Natalie is also one of our board members. She has a PhD in curriculum and instruction, but she also has a degree in dance anthropology. She has worked very closely with us here for a partnership program that partners UL education majors with LPSS students to come through the village for lessons based on our culture here. So we're thrilled to have Dr. Kiefer with us. And last but certainly not least, we have Old Chief John Mayo. Chief is a member of the Avogal tribe, and which is one of the oldest Louisiana tribes still in existence. He's head chief of the tribe for 20 years. He's written a book on the history of the tribe and is also a strong advocate of preserving the French language. And Chief has also been a resident artisan with us here at Vermilionville for many years, and he brings his lovely family with him today as well. And finally, the moderator for today. We're very fortunate to have Dr. Ray Brasher here to moderate for us. He is very well known in the folk life and anthropology world for this region of Louisiana, and an expert at many of knowledge for many things having to do with our culture. So we're very grateful to welcome him as our moderator.
Thank you, Melanie, very much. And we're very pleased to have Melanie stitching together programs like this. It's an honor to be here for myself and to be among such terrific panelists that we have here today. The topic of our discussion, of course, dance, but we call it the celebration of dance, and it's a good topic for us here at Vermilionville especially. We're here at the Performance Center, and every Sunday at least, and quite a few more times than that, there looks like a celebration going on in this room right here. There's an awful lot of dancing here, And of course, the reason for that is because of our visitors, our guests, and our community. We are directed towards dance. So it's very appropriate for us to consider that topic right now. Our panelists are what I would say are quite eclectic. So it's an eclectic group in the sense that they represent different communities. They represent different points of view, different traditions that they have. In some ways, different generations are represented here. And so we can follow quite a few different themes. I just would like to mention, and so as we start out, my own participation in this theme that we're talking about, dance, is not unlike many people in South Louisiana. I happen to be one of those who was taught to dance by my grandmother. So I know that's a common thing, at least for some people, in a certain age people, and it was something that I had to do. I didn't have a choice in that. So my grandmother was going to show me how to dance. And it is a good thing because it held me in, good stead for a good part of my life that I spent in dance halls. So I was very appreciative of that. But as we think about this term, and just to mention this term celebration, we should understand that I think an appropriate way of using that term is that we celebrate the meaning and the significance of dance to all of us in many, many different ways. And sometimes, for absolute certainty, when you see a dance scene, there's no question about the celebration that's going on. There's a lot of it happening, and that's what's going on. At the same time, we recognize in a larger sense that dance itself is not always only a celebration. So there are some people that employ dance in their culture. It has a great deal to do with their identity, their personal, their cultural and community identity, but it also may concern their connection with the cosmos, their connection with the spirit world, and it has many, many functions that could include healing, and all of those kinds of things happen in Louisiana too. So we're saying when we talk about celebration, we are celebrating the broad impact of dance in all of our various cultures in all the ways that it can happen. And it's going to be quite diverse. Before we start, I will just mention a couple of themes that we might explore here as we go, that we can, and with a panel like this. One of those themes has to do with tradition in the sense of continuity. Do we have old traditional, is what we're looking at when we go to a dance hall, is it a traditional dance? That's what we're talking about. Most folklorists today would consider tradition linked to change. So tradition and change go together because tradition does not stay the same. It does change over time. And so that's a theme that we can explore. And we have people here who have seen great amounts of continuity in dance, but also change. So I myself, as young as I am, so as young a person as I am, I've seen a lot of change in the dance. And it's just for example, and I'd just like to give a couple of examples because I believe one of the things that knit together such a discussion and could knit together is the concept of community. And community is so important no matter what the function of dance or no matter what style of dance. Community is something that's important there. And there were a couple of features that I recall in my youth that I saw on the dance floor that had everything to do with community. and that I may not see them in the same way today. And I don't know, so this is one of the kind of topics that we might discuss, all right. One of them is the simple thing that we all take for granted, at least in French dancing in our area, and that is the circle. There's a circle that moves, and it moves in a counterclockwise manner around the dance floor, and there's some people, couples are going around in a circle. Why is that? How did that come about? And what's the use and purpose for that? Well, one thing, it keeps things sort of in order, because what happens in a dance, I've seen it happen plenty of times, is enthusiasm takes hold. And when it does, the dancers may take up quite a bit of space. and at any rate, the orderly circle motion keeps things orderly enough. And so there is a sense of community, and everyone is permitted to dance. They can get in the circle, go around the hall without even being an expert dancer, for example. Anyone can participate. There were some other things in dance I just want to mention because this is a theme of community that we might explore. When I was young, the dances that I went to, one of the features that were very common was called the Paul Jones. The Paul Jones was a dance that put the women in a circle in the middle of the floor and the men in another circle facing the women to the outside of the women's circle. And the band members that played music, there was one that had a whistle. So when the dance started, the women were going in one direction and the men were going in the opposite direction. And when the whistle was blown, you would grab the partner next to you. The first partner you came to, it was a mixer. It was a kind of a mixer that permitted everyone to participate. Whether they were asked to dance or not, everyone would have a chance to dance if they were expert or not. Maybe they weren't the queen of the whole town, but that's all right. But the Paul Jones was made to allow people all to participate. And that is an aspect of dance in our area, I believe, that encouraged people to be dancers and to go to the dance and to participate in it, whether or not they were ready for the TV show or not, that kind of thing. And it's an important aspect of our area. So there's several themes. We also have cultural differences in our area, of course, and so dance is as diverse as our area is culturally, and so we could explore that kind of thing as well. Perhaps we should start out with Chief Mayu. I'm not going to call him old Chief Mayu because Chief Mayu he's not that old, so maybe he's former Chief Mayu. Maybe we could call him that, of the Avogel group. But there is a group of people, of course, tribal people in Louisiana who are very interested in their identity and in trying to maintain and perhaps even revive or develop aspects of their culture. What about the dance, Chief?
Excuse me. Well, the dance is a very important part of our culture, like you said. And as our previous entertainers mentioned, the Lipan Apache were telling us that dances, there are different types. Some are social, some are ceremonial, and some of the dances are even prayers as a part of the ceremonial. And it's very important. Each of the tribes had their own special dances also. Like in the southeastern portion of the United States, the green corn dance was something that was very important, and that was done by many of the tribes. Different dances mark different occasions. Unlike Dr. Brasso's dances, however, ours go in a clockwise direction.
Ah, okay.
So there is a difference. And as you saw with the Lipan Apache, the men were on the inside and the women were on the outside. So you see there is a cultural difference there as well. But it all works out. The place that most people are familiar with Indian dances are at powwows. Powwows are very important. You see them all over the country at different times of the year. Not so many in the winter, but in the spring, summer, and fall. And these dances usually incorporate different styles that have become standardized throughout the country. The men's dances, there are 4 categories for the men's, 5 now, and 4 for the women's dances. And some of the old dances are starting to be revived and brought back to these powwows. And it's interesting to see what comes up within the last 10 years or so. For the men's dance, the chicken dance is one that has been revived and is very interesting. And not too many people even knew that that existed for a long time. And now it's coming back to the powwows and is becoming very popular. If you ever get a chance to go to a powwow, there are 2 types. There are the open powwows where anybody can go. And you have some that are exclusive just to the tribe itself. For the open powwows, all of the powwows I know of in Louisiana are all open powwows. And you get to see the outfits. One thing I'd like to say is that we're very proud of our traditional outfits that we use for the dance. Everybody dresses up for a dance. When you go today, even in the barroom saloons that are still around, you'll see people dress up, and that's what we do. The women have a certain way to dress, and the men have a certain way to dress, depending on the type of dancing they're doing. These outfits are beautiful, and you cannot buy them on the internet. I'm sorry, but eBay does not have them. If you want to dress like that, you have to make your own. And of course, once it's made, you have a certain amount of pride in the work that you do, and you take care of it, because this is something that no one else has. And this carries on into what we have. Without the dancing, a tribe will die. It will cease to exist. The dancing is the heart. In fact, it's a firm belief that the drum and the beat of the drum is the heart of the tribe. And without that, the tribe is dead. And it's very, very important to keep that going. We've had enough to fight with over the years. For a long time, since the end of the 1800s, the early 1900s, early 20th century, there were very few dances that were allowed or even done, even on the reservations, because the federal government just would not allow it. You had to get special permission to have a dance. And it went on for a long time until finally around the mid-70s or late 70s, some of the Indian agents on some of the reservations, because the conditions were so poor, they decided to go ahead and allow some of the dances to be done for the public and invite the public in to try to raise money to help out the people on the tribe. Up to that point, when these dances were done, they were done in hiding, in secret. Just the members of the tribe would go someplace where the Indian agent wouldn't know about it, or the other people couldn't find them, and they conducted to keep it alive. That shows you how important the dance was. They had to hide to do it, and they did, to preserve the dances. So if you get the chance to go to a powwow today, thank those people who fought so hard to preserve them, and we still have them today to enjoy as a result of the courage of those people during that difficult time.
All right.
Now, I'd like to
Thank
go
you
ahead.
very much, Chief. Thank you for your words. And one thing, of course, we should mention here that everyone in this group right here is in some way engaged in education, learning, all right, but also education. And some of them, like Dr. Kiefer, is a doctor at the university, and of course she's interested in that. But the constant theme right there in terms of culture and culture process is called transmission. So transmission, how do you transmit the knowledge and the ability, skill that's required, the rules that need to be learned from one generation to another or from one person to another. It's learning. It's a learning process, whether it's at a university or anywhere else. But at any rate, that topic of transmission is one that you're very interested in, Dr. Kiefer and Natalie. Could you, you want to say something?
Since you're talking about transmission, I've had people that wanted to know if we ever teach the dances to outsiders. Normally, the dances are learned by the young children, starting out as soon as they can walk, going to the powwows and learning to dance from grandparents, from the other dancers at the powwows, and they start picking what kind of dances they're going to do. So we've never really had schools of dancing. It really was a tribal and a family thing that was done.
That's right.
So it's kind of hard to tell people how.
It's very important, and what you're describing sounds to me like what I would call the folk process, you know. So there's a learning that happens in a folk way that happens, that it's shared, it's learned, it's picked up from person to person and from older person to younger and that kind of thing. It is very important, and no amount of formal education is going to take the place of that folk process. And that's what's happening right here in Louisiana in all of our dance customs, is that there is that learning, person-to-person learning that happens, and yet we're starting to have schools for dance and lessons for dance and that kind of thing too. How does that work, Dr. Keith?
Well, I think that when we look at dance in an anthropological and in a cultural perspective, we can see dance for the purpose of socialization, for the purpose of transformation as well, not just transmission. So, for example, there are different dances that people do during different times of their lives, and that becomes a rite of passage, which communicates things within the culture and within the society itself. So dance is a form of nonverbal communication. We can actually look at it as linguistics without the language. It communicates a wide variety of different needs, wants, desires, creative aspects as well, as related to the individual, but it also communicates ideas from one generation to the next. So I taught ethnomusicology and dance anthropology as a high school teacher for 10 years in Tampa, Florida. And a lot of my students came from either Cuban backgrounds or Puerto Rican backgrounds, and the dances within those cultures were just as important for transmitting those cultures, their cultures, as we see across a lot of different cultures. Not only that, I think that we can say that music and dance is a universal. As a matter of fact, we know that mothers use song and even dance to socialize their children, but also to help them to be able to learn how to speak language. I know my son loves dancing to Zydeco music. It's one of his favorite things. But it's that fundamental and that essential to culture. We see it across the board. And I also think that dance is important from an energy perspective, from a tactile perspective. We know that a lot of societies have dances that tend to be a little bit more aggressive, and those, I think, are for the purpose of expending energy. But I also know from the purpose of education, and I'm talking mostly in a K-12 setting, young kids really need to get the wiggles out. And I taught high school, but I would have students that would come into my classroom and they had been on computers testing all day long. And the one thing that they looked forward to all day was having anthropology for their last hour, for their last period, and saying, oh my gosh, Kiefer, I need to dance. Can we get the wiggles out? I need to expend this energy so that I can focus on other things. And I think that that's kind of a testament to how fundamental dance is for the human experience. For the wiggles, for communication, for transmission, and for transformation as an individual.
All right. That's terrific. That's a great statement.
Thank
you. And you know, there's a thing called well-being. Well-being can be described and understood in so many different ways, and health and physical activity is one of those. And there's an amazing number of groups in our community today, whether they're tap dancing or whether they're engaged in these wiggles, you know. Some of them are for physical well-being, But in every case, they help to form a community as well, a community of the group that's participating, and in some cases, a connection with the larger groups.
Yeah, and I would even argue that for those of you that do come to the Bal du Dimanche, don't you look forward to Sunday, to being able to come here and get that energy out? And doesn't it feel good when you leave after you've been dancing for a few hours and you've experienced the excitement in the room? It's cathartic, and I think that that's something that from a psychological perspective that also meets that need that we have as a species.
Right. Okay, thank you so much. Again, many of us here, at least at the table, we're not maybe or maybe not known as dancers. That's not our primary mission in life, perhaps. And some are authors, scholars, observers of culture. Sherry Broussard is like that. She has been here in Lafayette and looking around in our location for a long time at cultural aspects and historical aspects of African American culture for sure. In our area, we are at a very interesting time where we can look across whatever cultural divides exist to try to understand what is unifying about, or what is connected about the different groups of people that we have in our area. And we have a diverse group. And we do find, if we do look across culture, even in our own area, we find that there is an amazing connectedness of groups. And of course, dance and music is one of those ways that things are connected. But I know that Sherry has looked at institutions and probably dance halls and that kind of thing. What do you think in your experience?
First of all, I just want to thank the musicians for Zydeco music. If you've never listened to it, you need to. It is not only cultural, it's family oriented. It started in families. It started with clapping of the hands. It started with the tapping of the feet when they had no instruments. They took those instruments to a higher level. They took Zydeco from the barnyards, from the backyards, from the porches, internationally, from America to across the world. And that was no easy feat. So I wanted this history preserved for the men and women who play it every single day. And I have a friend who will not clean her house unless she puts on Zydeco music. It's a good way to exercise. It's a good way. She said before she knows that everything is done, but she has to put in the CD. It is also, it's a combination of, it's folk music, of course. They write about what happens to them. They sing about what happens to them. They also will sing about what happens to you. One of them in particular, Armandine, they used to hide from him. He's known as the father of Zydeco music. They said if he visited you and your wife, or your wife and husband got into a fight, he'd go home and write a song about it that night, and he would perform it. So it's definitely have that folk music angle. And some people are kind of ashamed, and I don't want you to be ashamed, especially younger people. Some of the musicians I interviewed told me they never thought they played Zydeco music, that it belonged to their parents and grandparents. But ask me, haven't they changed that tune? It's worldwide, it's well known. They dance, they play the music. What I love about Zydeco music, it is culturally handed down. And it starts as early as when these young people are 3 years old. You'll see them on stage. I'm sitting next to Mr. Citizen, who bowed in the rub board, and these young little 3-year-old kids are strumming that rub board on stage. If you don't believe me, go to any one of their concerts and you will see children. So I love the fact that the culture is being passed on. I want to thank Dr. Brasso for his words, because when I wrote this book, I was simply trying to preserve the culture so that someday the family members can look back and see that yes, we have music, and yes, people dance to our music on the streets, in the homes, at church fairs, at festivals, you name it, on the stages in New Orleans, wherever they are. So I encourage you, if you have a favorite radio station, Do you have a favorite Zydeco band? If you have a favorite, whatever, if they're in your family, let's not do anything but honor them and thank them for the work that they've done. They work hard. They don't. My only problem with them is that they don't take really good care of themselves, most of them. So we have to encourage that. So I thank you for letting me be a part of this panel. I'm going to pass the microphone to Mr. Joe Citizen right now.
Thank you, Sherry, very much. Thank you. So, Mr. Joe, you're an institution yourself, especially around the dance scene in our area. But I also know, if I understand correctly, that you come from a place maybe just a few miles from where my parents grew up. And so your story, in some ways, it has to be connected to other people in that area around Acadia Parish. Citoyen, that's a citizen, very prominent family of traditional people. Do you remember the first time you learned to dance, Mr. Joe?
Yes, I learned how to dance, which I'm Creole. I'm not French, and I'm not with the Zydeco. I'm with the Lala music, who started with the Amadé Ardouin and Boissac Ardouin. So in other words, I learned how to dance Zydeco a little bit when Clifton Chenier started playing. But I want you to know that this music, this style that I dance, is not Zydeco, it's Lala music. Now, how did I start to dance this? I learned how to dance it through my parents. That's how we would learn. You'll have to excuse me because I got a cold. My daddy was born in 1889, and he said his first dance when he started dancing was in 1910. And then I was born in the 1930s, and then he showed me how to dance, the way he would dance, how they started to dance. They would dance 6 and 7 type of step in one round. It depends upon the type of music you played. You couldn't dance the same step as you began on the record. Whatever music they were playing, whatever step they had to play, you had to dance according to the steps and the sound of the music. And what they would go by, they didn't have any drum in those days. They would use their foot on the floor for the drum. So the beat of the drum was the beat of the foot of the musician that was playing on the stage, plus the bass and the guitar and the music where they had gone. If that music would go up, you had to change your step while the dance was going on. Every time he would change his move, you had to change your move on the floor. Now, if you would do the same thing through the whole round of the dance, somebody was going to pick up a glass of water and go throw on you, because they would say that you were bogged down, but they wouldn't say it in English. They would say it in French. Mais gars, il est embourbé. Lèche-moi yédé. So they throw a little bit of water on you to let you know that you've been doing that same step too long. You have to change step with your partner. Now, when I got on the floor and started dancing, it's because my mother would go to the dance, her and my daddy together. My daddy on the dance floor played music. My mother sitting down on a bench, and she wanted to dance. So I was about 8 years old. My mother would put me on the floor and have me to dance. But she would tell me, you're going to dance like your daddy danced. So I'd come up there and start dancing. Every time I'd go out of the way, she'd slap me on the head and tell me to dance like your pop there, boy. So I had to get right and dance according to the way that she was dancing. Now when we'd get back home, my daddy would get on the floor, and they had these old record player a long time ago. You had to swing, wind the thing up, and play the record, and him and my mother would get on the floor and dance, and my aunt and my uncle and whatnot. We had a little get-together on Friday night. You pick cotton all day long, and you dig sweet potatoes and do everything else. On the weekend, you get together underneath the tree. They would call it a China ball tree. I don't think they have these things anymore. and you would dance on a Saturday night. Somebody had an accordion, and they come out there with a T-fab, that's a triangle, and they'd beat that up and dance. But they would do different kind of dance, and they would go on from one place to the other one. And I was raised just like the gentleman was just saying a few minutes ago. My area came from Marlette, Church Point, Bristol, Crowley, Rain, Lawtell, and part of Bellevue. So all of us was living in that particular area. We would almost dance all alike because we were visiting each other. And we had nowhere to go. So we would get together and go to the Lala. They would call it the Lala. That was a place where all the Creole would get together and dance. And if you look at me, you see I'm dressed kind of funny. But I'm dressed the way that my daddy used to dress back in the 1920s and 1989. So it's the old style because this is what we used to do when we go in the field. You wear your overhaul, coverall, and then you had something they call a jumper, but we call it a coat for the hot sun so the sun wouldn't knock you out. And from then on, you see me out on the floor dancing. Please don't laugh because I learned it from my parents and it came from the old time. The music of the Amadei Adouin and Boisek Adouin. And I'm trying to be like this lady here, dance the Zydeco. But what I don't like about the Zydeco is that you can do the same thing the whole round. And you let my leg get tired doing the same thing. So you gotta do something else here, you know. And I'm looking at the Zydeco music, it sounds good. They on the same note all the time. He don't ever drop that note, so I gotta stay on that thing. So I'm gonna dance a few Zydeco records, but I'd rather go back to my old La-La music back in the 1930s. Thank you, and I wanna give it all.
Thank you, Mr. Joe, so much. A true all-star in this field, and you know, so we can't overestimate the power of dance to immerse all of us into this this kind of culture. However, there's been some huge transformations in the 20th century and into the 21st century, and what happens in our area and at our time is that young people come along and sometimes become disaffected with the older traditions or the traditions that are in a certain area. And if that happened, and it continued to happen, tradition would go away, or that particular tradition would not continue. So we have Ms. Gracie Babineau here, who has been, among any other thing that she does, I consider her one of those who revitalize, and a young person who decided. How did you decide that this kind of tradition of music and dance would be for you?
Well, I don't ever think that it was a conscious decision, at least early on, just because it was something that I had grown up with. So when I was younger, it was sort of an odd mix of music in our home, just because, you know, we had a lot of D.L. Menard, Belton Richard, that kind of thing. But also from my parents, I had Van Morrison, the Beatles, you know, things like that. So it was it was an odd combination. But the Cajun music side, the Cajun tradition side, it didn't seem like it was Cajun. It was just us. You know what I mean? But when I was 7, I started learning Cajun music. And for that, you know, I had learned a lot of songs, how to sing in French in school, from a wonderful teacher who just did it on her own. But I started learning that, and then I just decided that I wanted to play the accordion. My parents were like, what? What? But so I started to learn the accordion, and then my sister started playing along with me. And we started meeting so many different musicians and starting to hear their stories and seeing people dance and sing. And it was this whole, people don't realize that the culture in this area is so ingrained, more than people realize, I think. But all of it together, it it was really no question. When I found out about it and when I started learning about it and really digging deep into it, it was, yes, this is what I have to do. This is me.
Well, we certainly appreciate your contribution, because without that kind of contribution, we won't have the kind of thriving vitality that we do have around here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You know, I know Melanie is going to try to pull us off the stage. This is a conversation, and especially on today, on this day, that we should and we will continue this conversation throughout the day and take time to visit with these people. Thank y'all so much for your participation. And I'm anxious for our next part of the program with Daryl Bork here, and what other sorts of art could be associated with the dance. Thank you so much.
Again, thank you to Dr. Brashear and to our entire table of panelists. Thank you for being keepers of our culture, and thank you for celebrating our culture and helping our younger generations embrace our culture. We appreciate y'all, and we hope we'll see you on the dance floor in a little while. So at the present time, we've got Mr. Harold Bernard in the cooking school offering a half hour of free Cajun dance lessons if anybody's interested. We also have our LJ Alamos students. I see several of them still with us. What we're going to do right now is transition to one of the literary parts of our program. It's my great pleasure to introduce Mr. Daryl Bork, Dr. Daryl Bork, Professor Emeritus from UL, also a two-time state poet laureate, and he has written tremendously about musicians and music and dance and our culture. And he captures the beauty and the essence of our culture so eloquently through his words. He is going to transition us into a dance floor part of our program. So behind me we have the Huval Family Band. I think they're going to do a couple of collaborative pieces with Daryl Bork, and then the dance floor is going to be open for dancers, and we'll bring up some of our LJ Alamos students to show you some of their Cajun dance moves. So thanks everybody for being with us. Please help me welcome Dr. Daryl Bork.
Check, 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 check. Just keep me in track.
You're good.
Thank you all for being here, and thanks to the people at Vermilionville for organizing this kind of activity. I'd like to start off my poetry reading with a little song lyric that's not mine. Sherry and Joe mentioned that one of the great transmissions of culture is in family and in small dance halls, the places where we moved from la-la music to Zydeco music. And I'd like to start off with a song that was first made famous by a couple of la-la musicians, Eraste and Joseph, or Bébé Carrière, La Robe au Parasol. La roba parasol is, has its origins in folk music, and it's a kind of music that's called a mazurka. And so that kind of folk dance gets repeated all over the place in Cajun music, in Zydeco music, in La music. La roba parasol is a wide hoop skirt. And the lyrics to this song is Tai tarob, amod de parasol. Cut your dress, cut your dress, cut your dress in the full skirt side. Si t'as des hanches, tai tarob, de mode de parasol. If you have hips, if you have legs, cut your dress in the full skirt size. So the whole idea was that as the woman might have been dancing in a full skirt, she might have revealed parts of her legs, so that you have that kind of, that kind of sexiness that we associate with La music and with Zydeco music. The next section of that particular poem is Balancer, balancer, balancer dans les bras de ton homme. And that whole idea, when I saw the First Nation dancers doing that beautiful, elegant dance where there was just this kind of movement of the legs, where it was suggested that there was a kind of bending that's necessary to dance. And that kind of bending and that kind of holding in place balances us. And that's an important part of the kind of dance that either connects us to the spiritual world, to the material world, to identity, to whatever else. The next part of the song is Sommeiller, sommeiller, sommeiller dans le bras de ton homme. Dream, take a nap, go to sleep in the arms of your lover. And then it ends with Tai tarob, Tai tarob, Tai tarob. One of the great songs in the American songbook, in the La songbook, and in the Zydeco and Cajun songbook. I'm almost sure, that's a song that's recorded by Joe Hall, that's recorded by Iras and Bebe Carriere, and many of the younger groups of performers are picking up on that particular song, which is a dance song, and which sort of leads us to understanding the whole idea of dance and the connections between dance and community and dance and intimacy among human beings. That's essential for us to go on. That's essential for us to go through the process, as Shelley said, of transmission and transformation. I want to read a couple of three more poems, original poems of mine from the poems that I've written over the years. I grew up in the country not far from the places that Joe talks about. I grew up between Bristol and Lewisburg and Bellevue. And my uncle, Poyot Bergeron, owned a bar. And during the 1940s and the 1950s, the bars were segregated and the bars were separated. And I happened to live on the black side of Uncle Poyot's bar. And so from Friday afternoon through Sunday afternoon, I heard pre-Zydeco music. I heard a music that I didn't have a label for, but it was the kind of music that I was introduced to at the same time that I was listening to Chuck Berry and Little Richard, that'll mess with your mind if you're listening to Valmont Chevis and Chuck Berry at the same time. And my daddy was listening to Kitty Wells and Johnny Cash, coming from the radio station in Del Rio, Texas. But that kind of mix and that kind of mash, I think, is something that creates us, that gives us identity, and that transmits the important values. This particular poem is called From Poyot's Black Side. And Joe talked about that tradition or that necessity of going someplace and recreating after picking cotton and breaking corn and digging potatoes and so forth. And so this is sort of what that poem is a celebration of. From Pollo's Black Side. There's a reference in this poem to the other kind of music that I came to love, music of jazz, and progressive jazz, as represented by Thelonious Monk and Charlie Mingus and those great jazz musicians. And if you scratch the surface of la-la music and and even some of the classical music of the 19th century, you see the connections. But here's the poem from Pollo's Black Side. I doubt I could ever be a king's wrought gold anything, or a bird on a golden bough charming nobles in some enamored clime. But if on some Cajun Saturday night you ever wander through my land, we will drink wine and play us around while waiting for some distant time, talk of Monk and Mingus too. We will jump and swing. I'll tell you how on Friday nights we walked together from the fields and went our separate ways. From me to a small room, for the old black man to Pollo's Black Side, to charge the air with box and board and tub, and like a shaman sing and dance and shuck a 48-hour Saturday night. I'll take you to the open window near my bed and scratch and squeeze and sand your soul with Valmonchevis Zydeco, and we will, the both of us, be singing and stepping way past dawn, shuffling in three-quarter time, time into time. That power of dance and that power of music to bring us together and to create communities that are sometimes violently and aggressively separated is an important part of how music and dance works in our culture. If you look at the playlist behind any CD or record, you see that the most popular kinds of dances are mazurkas and two-steps and waltzes and breakdowns, and there's even a dance called the one-step. Now, I'm not really sure I know how you do that, how you do a dance that involves only one step. Maybe Joe gave me a clue about that. Maybe when you're dancing the one step too long, you need a little glass of water to come at you. But this is a poem that's in tribute to a great Cajun musician who learned his music and copied the music to a large extent of Amédée Ardouin, and that's Iry Lejeune. Iry Lejeune was a blind accordion player who grew up near Pointe Noire, which is sort of north and west of Church Point. And I wanted to ask you a couple of things. How many of you are part of a tradition where either you or someone that you know of in your family have crossed your legs and put a baby on your leg and given the baby that kind of ride? I think that's one of the ways that we begin to transmit dance even before children can walk, because what we're doing is transmitting rhythm and transmitting feeling and transmitting culture. How many of you in here, when you were growing up in school, sang Frère Jacques? Frère Jacques, the round, that has a dance beat, and that is, it's sort of one of those songs where if you have to keep your kids sitting down, you let them sing in rounds so that there's a kind of movement that begins to go on there. I'd like for us as a group to all sing that song before I recite the poem. Would you join me if I started? Frère Jacques, frère Jacques, dormez-vous, dormez-vous. Sonnez les matines, sonnez les matines, ding dong ding, ding dong ding. That particular song is a song a lot like what we're doing today. Brother John, are you sleeping? Brother John, are you sleeping? Wake up. Morning bells are ringing. It's an old song with a very, very old tradition, and it's actually can be traced back to calling the monks to prayer in the monasteries in Europe. So it's actually calling a brother, a monk, to wake up. You see how I incorporate that into the poem Church Point Breakdown. I once asked Barry Ancelet to explain to me what a breakdown was in music, and he said, well, listen to Ari Lejeune's song, Church Point Breakdown, and if you ever have a breakdown in Church Point, you'll know how to do it. And the other kind of song that I think almost has the beat of a mazurka as well is a naughty little song that we learned as a child. In addition to learning how to move, one of the things that we learn are those things that we're not supposed to be saying. How many of you in here know Sot Crapo? Okay, a few chuckles. Yeah, okay. And that was a song. That was a kind of little folk song, a little folk ditty that we passed along on the school ground. Jump frog, you burned your tail, but take courage, it's going to come back. And that there's all kinds of explanations and all kinds of interpretations of that. But one of the things that Shelley and Sherry and the panelists were talking about is the transformative power of music and the way in which it's only through transmission. And that's what, you know, our First Nation dancers were illustrating for us this morning as well, that it's only in transmission. It's only in some kind of public performance or some kind of performance that builds community, that we strengthen community, and that we find common identities. Church Point Breakdown. So remember, brother, there's a reference to another song in here. How many of you as children ever sang Tigalo? Tigalo, Tigalo, Agromamu. And one of the things that I loved about that particular song is that a Tigalo is a canter or a trot, which is more like the dance than a full-out gallop. Because there is a galop, which is part of a court dance, but a Tigalo is more civilized. A Tigalo is more tender. So here's Church Point Breakdown. Before you could walk, someone or another crossed a leg and put you on a foot, gave you your first ride, singing Tigalo, Tigalo. It was your first lesson in mobility. It was your first dance. In the playground or under the trees, you sang Sot Crapo with your cousins. You were learning double entendre along with resilience and rejuvenation, an early lesson in transformation. Mostly in the morning, you sang Frère Jacques, to be awake, a call in rounds to mindfulness, to get on with your life, not to sleep your life away. And then came those other songs, Bonsoir Moreau, and J'ai passé, La porte en arrière, Viens me chercher, and Les flammes d'enfer. Everything comes to us through the body. The great metered muscle, Maître et Maîtresse, showing us how to sing. Sex and love, loneliness and desire, how to fall apart, how to hold things together. when to stay, and when to break it down. Okay. It's a matter of time.
For any of you who've ever been intimidated by poetry, you can see that Darrell Bork has a gift for making it beautifully accessible, and we learned that it's just another way to share our stories. We've got the Huval family band on stage. They need to do a little sound check. Then we're going to call up our LJ Alamo students to kick off the Cajun dancing for y'all. So give them a few minutes to warm up. While they're doing sound check, we're going to make sure we acknowledge all of the wonderful partners we have who make this possible. This celebration is largely because of a grant that we received from the Artworks for the National Endowment for the Arts. We are fortunate today to have the Acadiana Open Channel crew here with us, and they're going to rebroadcast this so the wider community can have access to it. The Acadiana Center for the Arts is also a wonderful partner, as is the Center for Louisiana Studies, who will archive this recording. And Local Learning has been a long-term partner in many endeavors that we've done with young people and with the folk life for our region. And finally, we received some funding from the state of Louisiana's Culture Department through decentralized arts funding. We have several artists outside. Mr. Darrell Bork also has several books that he's published that include these beautiful stories and poems. And we have other authors outside as well. So we encourage you to enjoy the music. We encourage you to get up and dance. He's going to introduce the Huvals, get them going with a song that we'll call up our LJ Alamo kids for. Thank you so much for being here.
All righty.